Welcome to episode 60, the season finale of Successful Demo. In each episode, we analyze the theoretical and practical aspects of one or more newly released cards. In episode 50, we looked at good old account Siphon. Now, we'll be looking at its corp counterpart, the one card that has seen me through most of my Netrunner days. It's none other than Breaking News. It's my avatar for a reason. I like good cards, and Breaking News, turns out, is a pretty darn good card. It all started in Store Champ season of 2015, that's a long time back. This was my very first tournament win, and I did it with Space Tricks, where, it was a pretty radical thing back then, using Trick of Light to fast advance Astro Scripts and the like. But even though that was the flourish factor, that was, the trick involved Tricks of Light, you can see that there was some ingenuity in my deck when I was playing a one-off close accounts that could only be activated with Breaking News. That's how much I love the surprise factor of Breaking News. People just did not see it coming, and the Breaking News combo into tag punishment cards can be very debilitating indeed. I've always loved this aspect of Netrunner. Tag punishment wasn't very big back then. I mean, in the Breaking News sense, because the Breaking News tags faded away so quickly. But when you pulled it off, when you got a Breaking News combo off into trashing a key resource or getting a close accounts off, oh, that feels so sweet. But as time went by, I started to have a pretty distant relationship with Breaking News. This was my 2016 Store Champs winning deck. Even though it was also an NBN deck, I ditched Breaking News in favor of some more fancy agendas like Exploderpalooza. Even though I was running 3 traffic accidents and 2 scorched earths, they were begging to be activated with Breaking News. But I eschewed it, left it aside. And, that came back to bite me as time and again I found myself flailing, struggling with finding a good corp deck. I started playing a lot of Jammy HB, but it just never seemed to match the power level of the CTM decks that the pros were running. And then I turned back to my avatar, saw the Breaking News, and decided to come up with this monster that I'm sure all of you know and love, or should I say know and hate by now. A deck that at its very core revolved around this one broken agenda in Breaking News. Oh, it did so well. It did so much work for me. Breaking News was a really awesome card, and I was never sad to see it every time I play a game with this deck. And coming in second place at Worlds was a mixed blessing. Even though it would have been nice to come in first and get some sweet alt arts for Boom, in the end, Chris Dyer did give me some Breaking News alt arts after all, given that, not full bleed arts I should say, given that his champion deck has Breaking News in it as well. But also more importantly, it saved the Sync deck from getting hammered by the Most Wanted list in its subsequent iteration. And it still proved to be a force to be reckoned with when in the following year at Euros, Mike Sheehan, whom I've interviewed on my channel before, played pretty much the exact same deck, the same archetype, and also did very, very well with it. So, Breaking News. Breaking News is very powerful. And, its time was coming. People realized that it probably shouldn't be in the game, so Breaking News got rotated out. I still stand by my opinion that Breaking News should have stayed in the game, kind of. But, it enables a very fast-paced style of Netrunner and a very proactive NBN strategy. And having that removed from the game is, kind of sad actually. So when I opened the Rain and Reverie spoilers and saw the gem in Fly on the Wall, I was immediately rejuvenated. This was the card that we've been waiting for. The tempered, watered down version of Breaking News. First off, Its artwork is very annoying to look at, much like the alt art pop-up window. It's ugly, it's ugh, but I think it fits the card. It fits it very well, as it's supposed to be annoying, perhaps only half as annoying as the original one. In breaking news, in more ways than one, but Fly on the Wall is the proactive agenda that I've been looking for, as it gives the runner a tag even though they haven't run. So Fly on the Wall, compared to breaking news, really is half as effective, if not less. Breaking news used to be able to combo with a whole myriad of cards, most notably Scorched Earth and Boom, the latter of which I use in the Sync deck, and Fly on the Wall no longer has those combinations, one of which has rotated, and the other requiring 2 tags, which you do not get. Fly on the Wall only gives 1 tag instead of 2. So the only cards you can truly combo with Fly on the Wall are Exchange of Information, which works, as well as Close Accounts. The other problem with Fly on the Wall is that it's no longer a 2-1 agenda, and that's a pretty big deal, because breaking news in the past used to be an easy source of agenda points. Just install Double Advance as soon as you draw it, meaning that as a runner against NBN, you have to put on a lot more R&D pressure to ensure that the breaking newses don't end up in the co-op's hand. The other big problem is if you are using breaking news for its tag function as opposed to its agenda point function, you cannot tag punish from an unadvanced state. With breaking news, back when breaking news was legal, every face down NBN card in NBN could be a breaking news that the co-op could easily double advance and score on the next turn, followed by some sort of nasty tag punishment. But with Fly on the Wall, that's not possible because you need 3 advancements. So to get the same amount of punishment, you will need to start Fly on the Wall with a single advancement counter on it, which is a lot more, which telegraphs to the runner that is potentially an agenda, so it's a lot harder to pull off combos with Fly on the Wall. That being said, it's still possible, and that's something we're gonna look at today. But one thing's for sure though, looking at the tag punishment cards it combos with, Fly on the Wall, it seems like it's not something that can be used in a kill deck. Without Scorched Earth and the Boom combination, we are forced to look at in-factions tag punishment cards, and we are also forced to look at ice. We actually need ice, unlike my Sync deck, which typically can operate without a remote at all, just fast advancing agendas as you go. You need to have the Fly on the Wall single advance, as I mentioned, but more importantly, you do not have a 24/7 news cycle to trigger Fly on the Wall at any time you like anymore. That's because 24/7 is now on the ban list, at least for now. So because of that, Fly on the Wall needs to be in a semi-glacial style deck where it is protected by ice, single advance, waiting to pounce on the runner if they do not contest it. And this is the deck that we're going to be looking at. Some interesting cards here. Firstly, our tag punishment is, as mentioned, a Close Accounts and Exchange of Information. In the early game, Close Accounts is more likely going to be used, that's why we are running 2 copies of it. This can easily set the runner's tempo back a lot, especially those that try to set up a good board state and a healthy amount of credits before running. They will be nastily shocked when a Close Accounts hits them. Towards the late game, where it's very likely that you have drawn your one-off exchange by this point, and the co-op probably has stolen a global food by the point, exchange becomes super effective, allowing you to score a Fly on the Wall and then trade it immediately, making that single advance agenda in the remote, originally worth 1 point since it's a Fly on the Wall, now worth 3 points because it's a global food, while denying 1 point to your opponent because they just lost a global food for a measly fly. So that's the combo we are looking at with Fly on the Wall, and there are some ways to go about getting it. Now, because this is not a kill deck, we still need to score agendas. So Sales Team is going to be a very key agenda. Just like Fly on the Wall, it can be single advance, and if you do score it, it will give you the money needed to then get your ice res, but more importantly to trigger a Rella Salvatore. This card allows you, when you score an agenda, to put another card in the remote single advanced, and that's the whole idea of this deck, to get lots of single advanced cards in the remote, threaten it every other turn, so that they have to keep challenging it, because the next single advanced card could very well be the Fly on the Wall that closes your accounts, or that causes an exchange of information. So yeah, not much else to say. This certainly doesn't seem like the glory tier 1 deck that was sync, but we'll see how far we can get with it. Alright, today we are up against Max, and our opening hand is kind of garbage, no ice at all, so we are going to mulligan into an equally garbage hand with no ice. No useful ice, that is. Excalibur doesn't count. Thankfully, we draw into IP block, so we are able to play pretty aggressively with the Rashida that was in our opening hand. And thankfully, our opponent doesn't contest the Rashida either, so we're gonna get a good 3 cards here and a lot of money. That's a lot of money. Not a lot of good cards, good ice, but you know, fly on the wall into the remote just to keep it safe because that's an important agenda. Now I really want to start advancing the fly on the wall as I do here. Put the Arella Salvatore there and really hope that I mandatory draw into close accounts or an exchange of information. That way I can punish my opponent for floating tags. You see, this is one of the downsides of fly on the wall. The moment you start single advancing it, the runner's surely gonna run it, and there's not much I can do about it. It's a Jewel into IP block, both very porous ice. In fact, Jewel does absolutely nothing here, except to prevent my opponent from installing any paper clips in their bin. But that doesn't matter because they can easily waltz past the IP block by paying into the Trace 3. So this ended up being a completely worthless remote that did absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. This was where I really wish I had one of those bigger eyes like Endless Eula. But well, not much we can do about it. I was thinking whether to boost the Trace here. In the end I did boost it just to the point where I can still play IPO on the next turn. Force them to beat it, so you know, now they're down to 6 credits, which is okay. But losing the fly on the wall, not so okay. I'm playing very brazenly here by leaving 2 big agendas in my hand. Really, I should be jamming one of them in the remote, but I really wanted to get the hedge fund IPO out. So turn passes over and I'm going to start advancing the sales team here, double advance to ensure that it looks like an NGO front. My opponent Ormaquas into HQ here, steals the global food that was in my hand, a pretty good shot of them getting it. So now things are not very good, they have a lot of points, but we do have one thing going for us here, and that is the fact that our opponent now has a global food in the score area which can be exchanged. You notice that the other advantage of double advancing the sales team the last turn is that on this turn, when I double advance the sales team, I have 1 click remaining to install the fly on the wall that I top deck off R&D. So that's the upside to double advancing your sales teams. Firstly, they look more like NGO fronts, meaning your opponent is less likely to contest them, but more importantly, it saves you from bad draws. At that point, I really didn't want to draw into an agenda on R&D, but since I had 1 extra click, I could jam the fly on the wall into the remote pretty safely. My opponent continues racking up Ormakua counters, which is a smart thing to do. Seeing the same Jewel 3 times, which was really funny. And now I draw an NGO front, which would go into the remote, except that there's already a fly in the remote. So not enough space for a fly and an NGO front, so instead I'm going to get 1 turn destruction. Goodbye NGO front, but no agendas in the bin. I'm going to continue building up this remote because I really need the exchange to go through, or at least a close accounts to hit. I still haven't drawn any of my tag punishment cards, so I can't advance the fly on the wall yet. As I mentioned, the moment I advance it, my opponent will surely contest it and they'll get in because they have an Ormaquas at high strength. So that's a very big problem. This Ormaquas is starting to get out of hand and it's very easy for them with the 20 credits to challenge server 1. So after some thought, as I drew into my toll booth here, I decided, okay, I guess I'll play for the slow game. I'm gonna ice out all my servers and purge virus counters eventually. The good news is, as long as I don't advance anything in the remote or put anything new in there, it's unlikely that my opponent will run the remote. So my fly on the wall is gonna be safe in there for now. And thankfully, I avoid the 1 in 3 hit on my sales team in HQ because the toll booth on HQ keeps my opponent out. They were 1 strength short of getting through the toll booth, and that's a big deal. It did cost me a lot of money to rest the toll booth, and it, the Ormaquas kind of renders the Excalibur on R&D kind of worthless, but it's a fair trade considering that, my HQ is relatively agenda dense. Now we finally find one of our big cards, one of the forward tempo upgrades in our deck, Ginger Grid. The other is Arella Salvatore, which got trashed by my opponent before it even got to fire. So Ginger Grid, very useful right here. I'm definitely thinking of jamming it into server 1. We'll see if I go through with that. I am very tempted to purge here. I do purge. Why did I purge here? The reason is if I did anything but purge, say I put the Ginger Grid in server 1 and maybe install the Jewel on archives, my opponent can easily run my hand, run through the toll booth and easily steal the sales team. And we didn't want that to happen. So by purging here, at the very least, I'm forcing my opponent to run archives 4 times. They will get fewer virus counters than they were on before. They were previously on 5, now they're only on 3, now 4. So yes, I'm still coming out ahead here. I spent 3 clicks to deny my opponent 4 clicks of running archives. So I think I'm coming out ahead here. The most important part is now that they are on 4 virus counters only, it means that they can't run HQ the next turn. I can put some ice on archives and do something else. Right, I'm going to install the Ginger Grid, I'm going to install the archives ice, and I'm going to look to purge again the following turn. Reset the armor core down to 0. So now they're going to play Ice Carver, which is really rude. That's just really rude. And deep data mining is also very, very rude. But thankfully, I have an even ruder counterplay, or rather counter card in Archangel. That's the ice people don't see coming. It triggers on access. So now my opponent is forced to access this 6 strength Archangel that with their 4 strength armor core. That's bad news for them. I do not think they have a Black Orchestra in the bin. So they are going to be forced to trace through, and I'm thinking of whether it's worth it to pump the trace here. If I pump the trace beyond their means and bounce their armor core, ooh, that's gonna be really interesting. That's really spicy. So I have a good think about it for a while, but decide that the money I have right now is very important. My sales team is running dry. I don't have the ability to get money via NGO front or Rashida or sales team that's in my hand, simply because the remote's occupied. I could install double advance the NGO front, so that could have been an option, but I chose to simply tax them for 6 credits. They access a bunch more cards and actually whiff on the deep data mining, giving me a sliver of hope. So the reason I did not choose to Archangel bounce their armor core was that I was intending to purge virus counters the next turn anyway, resetting their armor core regardless. So there was no need for me to expend money on doing that. I needed to save the money for rezzing the rest of my ice. So yeah, because I have an Endless Euler on server 1 if I remember correctly, so I need that money. So now my opponent's in a state where they have a decent amount of money between Patchwork and the 12 credit Liberator accounts, but no good breakers. Their armor core was reset to 0. Right? So it's very important to keep this board state in mind as we move on with the game. I'm going to get the Rashida going. IP block into Rashida means that even if they try to contest it, they're going to take attack because they have an installed AI breaker. They play the Hacktivist meeting here, which is incredulously annoying. This deck doesn't have a good counter. It doesn't have counter currents, and it doesn't have a good way to clear currents either. It's not running 15 minutes, and I certainly do not want to score the fly in the wall in my remote just to get rid of the Hacktivist. I need the fly in the wall to do much more work than that. So after some thinking, I decided, heck it. Rashida is too good, I'm gonna res it here, even if it means trashing a random card. Thankfully, it did not hit the sales team, so I'm gonna get the Rashida off fairly nicely, and I find the golden ticket, the exchange of information. Now that's where we begin to play. You'll notice that I did not res the Ginger Grid on the Rashida fire. Having Ginger Grid here means that I could have potentially piled the HB Ice in my hand onto server 1. I didn't do that because Hacktivist. I really didn't want to send my sales team or the Archangel in the bin. I was willing to, pay to put the ice on the server, even though it's pretty expensive. I mean, Asmari is pretty rich, so, I was kind of willing to do that. So, hedge fund, I'm now going to put an ice on the server, because credits are kind of tight. As I said, missing the Ginger trigger means that I'm not that rich. I'm going to put the Gatekeeper on the remote instead, leaving the Fairchild 3 on R&D. It's not very likely that they'll go for R&D anyway. If they try to deep data mine, hopefully the Fairchild 3 can stop them. Right, so now they run HQ and they do have their Black Orchestra to they have access to the Black Orchestra. They note that here they are not using David to break the toll booth. They just simply use clone chip to get David out because they're probably gonna levy soon. They broke it with Black Orchestra because toll booth was 4 strength due to ice cover. Now the sales team that was in my hand the entire time was finally stolen from my opponent. I really wish they didn't run HQ here. At this point I kind of wish that I res the Jinja after all, because the sales team would be in a safer place. Archives, because they weren't running archives. So now they're on match point. This is really bad, and now they're getting all their breakers out and levying. Using their last clone chip to get the MK Ultra into play. Now they have all their breakers. I can't really stop them. But having levied, this puts them at a pretty weak spot in terms of money. I can abuse this 1 turn scoring window. As you see me about to do here, I'm going to double advance the fly on the wall. So if they aren't able to contest this server, and it's quite likely that they can't, I'll be able to exchange the fly for the global food, and then we'll have a true game, because yeah, things are going to get real heated if that happens. I'm really hoping they don't have a stim hack in hand here, because that would be one way they, blast through my remote. They are missing a paperclip though. That's important to keep in mind, because this means that IP block will do a lot of work. They run into my Jewel on archives, and that basically prohibits them from installing cards for the rest of the turn, which is really nice. So they can't, play their money resources like daily casts. They are forced to click for credits here. And now it's time for my trick. Fly on the wall is gonna buzz around my opponent and annoy them to no end. Now, usually you would res Arella Salvatore here and get the trigger. Even though I don't have anything worth installing, no assets or agendas, I can still install a piece of ice with Arella, and I believe it circumvents install costs. Obviously, we cannot do that here, because if we res Arella and we manage, the hacktivist manages to hit our exchange of information, we are very sad. So yep, better not to risk it at all, because the exchange is going to be a huge swing, as you'll soon see. Currently, I'm on 3 agenda points, my opponent is on 5 agenda points, but with the single swoop of an exchange, now I've regained the agenda lead, 5 agenda points to my opponent's 4. This changes everything, right? So scoring the fly on the wall is so good, because it's like scoring a 3-point agenda, right? Converting a double advance card in the remote to a 3-point agenda is kind of like scoring a normal 3-point agenda, except that you deny your opponent agenda points in the process, because exchange removes agenda points from your opponent's scoring pool. So that's really cool. Oh, and by the way, they're still tagged. I have 1 remaining click. Let's do something real cool. Let's trash their bloody ice carver. That should make things a lot harder for that armor core to get going. I am aware that they are running David and clone chip, which is a huge pain, because by trashing ice carver, it turns the David back on. David can now break toll booth, where previously it can't due to toll booth being at 4 strength, but that's something I'm willing to do. It's quite unlike, it's more important to tax out their breakers rather than to, tax out their Davids. So that was what I was going for here. And finally, they start dropping the resources they couldn't last turn due to the Jewel. So this gives me yet another scoring window to push another agenda through. This time it's going to be a global food. I'm looking at my eyes. Can I do it? In either way, it's not much of a risk, because even if they steal the global food here, they won't win the game. They will only be on 6 points thanks to the fly of the wall exchange. So I'm going to advance the global food here, and we'll see whether they can stim hack into my remote. They play the hacktivist. Looks like they're going for my remote. This is going to be real tricky. Clone chip comes out, and they run my remote without a stim hack. Do they actually have enough money to get through my remote? Okay, first off, Gatekeeper's not going to keep them out for sure. I'm just going to res it for the sake of resing here, because it's going to be easily defeated by David. The only real question here is whether my opponent wants to spend 1 or 2 David counters on the Gatekeeper. Moving on to IP block, they have milled their paperclip on the second levy run, so they're able to install it from the bin and break the IP block. Unfortunately for them, by using paperclip here, they actually spend 4 credits to install it, so that takes away a lot of money from their credit pool, leaving them pretty poor, unable to contest the next piece of ice in the way. As you remember, the middle ice is an endless Euler. They won't be able to get in regardless. You'll also notice that one thing that really helps my cause here is trashing the ice carver. Ice carver would have made each IP block on this server 1 credit cheaper to break. So every credit counts, especially since I'm not running any defensive upgrades. All my upgrades are offensive in nature. Ginger Grid, piling ice on the server, and Arella Salvatore, jamming new agendas in there. None of them actually actively protect the agenda that's sitting in there right now, unlike an Ash or a Marcus Batty. So it was very lucky that my opponent did not have enough money to contest the server. With a stim hack, they would have easily got in. So unfortunate for my opponent. They were just short of money, and as a result, I was able to close out the game by scoring the agenda. That was a pretty insane game, wasn't it? I really thought my opponent had this one in the bag, but Fly on the Wall in exchange changed the game, the entire game. I mean, props to my opponent. They played super well. That's why they were able to drag it this close. They were basically one stim hack away from making this very even match. My opponent knew where the agendas were. They knew the pressure points. They applied adequate pressure on HQ, running at the perfect times to steal a lot of agenda points from HQ, knowing that otherwise they would have challenged the remote, which was a lot more taxing. So yes, my opponent played and maxed that deck very, very well, a lot better than I would have piloted it myself. That being said, there's not much you can do against Fly into exchange if you don't contest the Fly, and that's, well, the punishment the runner deserves. What makes it really oppressive, however, is the fact that the agenda suite is just so resilient. Because you're running Global Food Initiative, you don't have a lot of agenda points in your deck at all, and not a lot of agendas either. So if you manage to get the Fly swap as I did, and even if my opponent had the stim hack at the end of the game to steal the global food in my remote, their score area would look like what's on the screen right now. Fly sales team, Fly food, which is 6 points, not enough to win the game. So yeah, it's the resilience of the agenda suite in this deck is kind of astounding, considering there are no quantum kitties in there at all. And it's really a lose-lose situation for my opponent if they try to contest the Fly on the Wall, because it's behind so much taxing ice, and runners just aren't very good at breaking ice nowadays. If I have the Fly exchange combo up and I have the advanced Fly in the remote, I'm threatening to gain 3 points because of the exchange with global food, and to drag 1 point away from my opponent while doing so. On the other hand, if they do manage to siege the remote, all they'll get is just 1 agenda point for their efforts. So this is kind of like cards like MCL Austerity Policy, which force the runner through a remote only to prevent the court from scoring points. It doesn't help the runner advance the game by scoring points themselves. So that's what's so amazing about Fly on the Wall, the fact that it can convert from a 1 point agenda to a bigger one with the exchange combo. It's probably the most effective combo you're gonna get with Fly on the Wall in the current card pool. It really helps that nowadays tag avoidance cards aren't played much. Back in the breaking news days, New Angela City Hall was a thing, but nowadays tag prevention is less readily available. Forgers not played at all outside of Geist, and No One Home, while a pretty good tag prevention card itself does have a trace condition on it. With Asmari being as rich it is, it's not uncommon for the court to be richer than the runner, and thus able to beat the trace. This is in contrast to other tag-based cards like Seesaws and Hard-Hitting News that require a trace themselves. So those cards are a lot less effective with No One Home, because you would need to win 2 traces as the court. With Fly on the Wall, you only need to win 1 trace to get the tag, No One Home trace. But that being said, Fly on the Wall is actually not that good of an agenda, because it is very, very useless without exchange or close accounts. If you think about it, the reward you get for scoring this 3-1 agenda is to force the runner to lose 2 credits and 1 click, clearing their 1 tag. That's pretty shit. I'm not gonna lie, it's kind of as bad as Hyperloop extension in HB, but even Hyperloop is justifiable because you have the Sports Metal ID, which makes the money gain a lot more palatable. You're getting a big burst out of that out of Hyperloop. Not to mention that Hyperloop also gains you the money even when the runner steals it. For Fly on the Wall, it doesn't give you a TGTBT effect if the runner steals it. So it's purely a proactive agenda, which, while is a good thing, it's a lot weaker than what it could have been. That coupled with the fact that it's very time sensitive. At the time when you have your advanced fly on the wall ready to go, you need to have a close accounts or exchange in hand ready to land on your opponent. And your opponent must have, for the case of exchange, they must have a global foot in their score area, or at least a decent 2-point agenda to swap. In the case of close accounts, the runner must have, a decent number of credits to siphon away. So either of these cases, it's a lot of setup. All the stars must line up. Because of that, fly on the wall is a very unwieldy agenda. It's so difficult to get it to work decently at all, because if you score it by itself, it's kind of useless. If you score it without an attack punishment operation in your hand, it's useless. There are lots of situations where fly on the wall is just useless, and at that point, you're much better off playing a tempo deck with AR enhanced security and assets, and change the ID to CTM and everything. So that begs the question: how do we make our life easier if we are trying to play a fly on the wall deck? How do we score a fly on the wall without arousing suspicion? Because as you saw, when I tried to single advance my fly on the wall, the very first one, my opponent swiftly ran the remote and stole it because I telegraphed the advancement counter. Well, besides NGO front, some other ways to do it are with fast advance cards. Cards that you typically use for fast advancing 3 advanceable agendas can be used to help sneak your fly into their apartment unnoticed. The most notable ones are Calibration Testing in Faction, Baltic Labor, and Jeeves, the latter two from HB Faction. So typically with 3 advanced agendas, these fast advance cards allow you to score your agendas from hand. However, because we need the extra click to do the follow-up, say an exchange or close accounts, the fly on the wall must be pre-installed. It must be in a secure remote. It can be unadvanced, but it must be sitting there. Then the next turn, you do Baltic Labor, which allows you to triple advance the fly on the wall and then follow up with an exchange. Or in the case of Jeeves Model Bioroids, triple advance, trigger Jeeves, the extra click you can use to exchange. In the case of Calibration Testing, you double advance the fly on the wall with your first 2 clicks, you Cali testing the last advancement counter on it, and then you exchange. So these are cards that allow you to get fly on the wall from an unadvanced state into an exchange state within the span of 1 turn. And you might be wondering, well, that's kind of that's still not very good. You're still leaving the fly on the wall vulnerable in your remote for a turn. I never needed to do this with breaking news. And yes, you're right. That's one reason why fly on the wall is a lot less strong than it was. But that being said, most runners are actually, from what I noticed, don't actually run unadvanced cards against NBN all that much. And the reason is simple, especially if you're playing taxing ice, if your ice suite is good enough, they'll be very deterred from running unadvanced cards, because why would they risk themselves unnecessarily to hit what might be, a useless upgrade that ends up getting them tagged due to hard-hitting news. As NBN, by default, people assume you're on hard-hitting news, so they avoid running taxing remotes by default. And that's something you can leverage, the passiveness of runners, because honestly, what's there to lose if you let your opponent get an unadvanced card out? At most it's a Rashida Jahim, which is pretty bad. At most it can be an AR enhanced security, which is also pretty bad, but it's much more preferable than taking a hard hitting news to the face. So a lot of runners just leave unadvanced cards unattended, and you can punish them in combination with one of these cards. The other thing is, if you're sick and tired of putting unadvanced cards in remote, well, here's your solution. Play MCA Austerity Policy. This card is also really, really good at getting a fly on the wall from your hand into your score area, follow up with a close accounts or exchange in the same turn. You can even follow up the close accounts with a hard-hitting news after that. Swamping your opponent with 5 tags and 0 credits. That's a combo for another day, but it's definitely something you can think about. Well, fly on the wall at the end of the day is no breaking news, and I'm kind of sad that this power card was taken away because I had so many fun times with it. But in all seriousness, it probably was for the good of the game. Even though I pushed for breaking news to stay post-rotation, seeing that it was replaced by an agenda that kind of does the same thing, but a lot more balanced in a sense, it's kind of a nice consolation prize. Because at the end of the day, what's most important is that the game designers still acknowledge that combo-based decks can be a thing. Maybe not as good as the tempo-based NBN decks like CTM that you see around, but you can still play them. The option is still there. They might not be as good as what they used to be last time, but you can still have a fun time like I did playing it this game. Do you yourself have any fond memories of breaking news? I'd love to hear from you. Share them in the comment section. I'm looking forward to read them. In the meantime, as always, thanks for watching and thanks for supporting this successful demo series. Always be running. Nope, we are not done just yet. I still have a few tricks up my sleeve.